Eric is not on holiday. Yeah, we are live.
Okay.
Hello.
I think we are live now. Hello. Hello, and welcome to another coordinating meeting of DiEM25, the Movement for Europe, featuring progressive ideas you won't hear anywhere else. And today, we're talking about art. How can art help us to achieve our political goals? How can it bring about the change that the world so desperately needs? Now, DiEM25 is a movement that, since its inception, has always taken art and artists very seriously, from working closely with artists for creative campaigns, to developing cultural policy for Europe, to maintaining long-standing connections with some of the leading artists around the globe, which some of you guys who have been following our YouTube channel will be familiar with. And it does all of this through our arts and culture platform, which is called DiEM Voice. And I'm delighted that in today's call, we've got the three people that run DiEM Voice, Danai, Nadia, and Kit. So first, they're going to be speaking about DiEM Voice, what it is and where it's going, and how you guys can get involved. And then afterwards, we'll open up the call to the wider coordinating collective on the call to have a discussion about art and politics. You out there, if you've got any comments, anything you want to throw at us, any ideas on these topics, please put them in the YouTube chat and we might be reading them out in between the interventions. Now let me hand over to Danai to kick it off. Danai.
Hello, thank you, Mehran, and hello, everyone. So I was the initiator of DiEM Voice, of the art platform of DiEM since the beginning. With Yanis, this is a dialogue which has been an ongoing dialogue, how art and politics can inform each other since we first met, which is 15 years ago. And from this perspective, from the very beginning of DiEM, we founded the platform DiEM Voice, which aimed at the experiment of seeing how can art be informed by the politics and the politics also be shaped by the art. So this was an experiment. This is how DiEM Voice started, in a way more by asking questions and being present at the political meetings of DiEM throughout Europe for the first 2 years, and giving the opportunity to the people who were following these events, our members and more, to express themselves, ask questions, and then these thoughts from our audience and our members would be brought back to the people making the politics, taking the decisions, but also to artists in order to create artworks, and for the political team, let's say, of DiEM, to be informed of what people thought and include this in their priorities, let's say, or in the shaping of the ideas that would make DiEM go forward. So this is how we started off. And at some point, because always an initiative that is volunteer, as we have seen in many sections of DiEM, at some point may sort of die out. So here I wanted to say I'm not actually running DiEM Voice, but I was one of the initiators. But many people helped the first phase of it to run. Kit was one of them, of those people, and she stuck with it for all this time. So here she is running it now together with Nadia. Just to make this the link of how we got there. At some point, with the COVID pandemic and all that it brought to the art world, we thought, and discussing this with Srečko and Ivana and Yanis, of course, and everyone, and Eric and other people within the movement, we thought that this was a good moment to reset, let's say, DiEM Voice, to see how it could function from the grassroots and become more integrated with the movement's goals, in order to be able to reach to a wider audience of people who may not be so comfortable coming to a political movement, but they may be more open to the art part of it. So let me quickly just wrap it up here, and we'll be back, and to introduce Kit Hill and Nadia Sales Grade. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this well, who were the two people we, after many interviews and opening up a call and having amazing people who wanted to help with this effort, we thought that these two people were the best people to start this effort in order to integrate DM Voice within the goals of DM of 25. So I give the floor to Nadia first, I believe, to inform us of what we have achieved in the last year since we started, we rebooted, and then Kit will talk about the future plans.
Hello, everyone. So I'm just going to quickly summarize what we have been doing in these last months. So the first big task we had was to build up our website, where you can learn about DM Voice current activities, but also get in touch and know how to get involved as an artist or as any other, because we think about the artists and culture in a very broad sense. So if you are a creative in some kind of way, you're always welcome to come to us and try to get involved somehow in all our activities. So that was our big task, for our first task, and we launched the website in April. With the website, we launched a first online exhibition in our gallery, on the gallery of our website, called Raise Your Voice for Assange, and that was basically our first artistic campaign in line with DiEM25 principles, and also in defense of a member of the advisory panel of DiEM25, Julian Assange. So we have 80 artworks on our gallery that you can look at. After that, we kept on doing this campaign on Julian Assange's birthday, around the 3rd of July, when Julian Assange celebrated his 50th birthday, with a new campaign called Why Are You So Afraid of Assange, that had two aspects. One, protest action on the day of his birthday, where DiEM25 members went out on the streets with masks or with the artworks from our gallery, or even with chairs to replicate the Davide Dormino sculpture with the chairs and with the whistleblowers and the journalist Julian Assange. And also we organized a DiEM-TV special episode with Davide Dormino and Angela Richter, two artists that have been doing exactly what we want to do more and more with DM Voice, which is bring artists together with politics, make this perfect mix between both, and be able to get to a broader audience. And what else? We have been involved with many different DiEM25 projects, such as People's Gatherings, such as Green New Deal for Europe. And we also organized, we have already like a team of work in design organized that you can join to help us with design, with video, with photography, whatever your skills are in terms of visual identity. You can also get involved with DiEM25 and help us make all our overall visual identity look more creative, basically. So now I'll give Kit the chance to talk about the future plans of DM Voice.
Hi, thank you, Nadia. Yeah, so now we've reignited and sort of done all these initial projects. Come autumn, we're really looking towards starting to develop and create a cultural policy. I think especially the pandemic has shown a clear light that shone a light onto why we need to really focus on this now. It's so crucial. There's lots of
Oh, did we lose you, Kit? Yes, it looks like we did. So Kit will be back later when she sorts out her internet problem. It's live, that's what happens. Patrizia, you had raised your hand, and then we'll bring Kit back in if she reconnects.
Okay, thank you. Very briefly, just a quick reflection on how art should work a key role more and more in politics and in our cultural revolution we should do, we we should need. First of all, I think we also should think a little bit about a definition of art, because in my opinion, art embrace literature, writing, art, painting, sculpture. I mean, many different topics and tools, and we need all of them in this cultural revolution at all levels. If I think in my country, one of the most important dangerous we have is due to the last 20, 30 years due to our Berlusconi cultural, let's say, way of thinking. It is completely wrong. So the only way we have to try to change completely this kind of thinking is through art. And art in a way should be the way to train curious and life-hungry thinkers. That's, I think, it's a good point to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrizia. Claudia.
Yeah, thank you, Patrizia. I underline everything you said, and but one thing you missed in arts, it's music. And
yeah.
as you may know, that I was working in the music industry, and I'm still working for musicians and artists doing music. And I still think this is a very important tool. And as we can see in Germany, for example, the bad thing is, for example, there are many right-wing bands here. They are doing really bad text, and they are really huge, and they have a big audience. They are doing concerts with thousands of people, like it's called Rechtsrock, means right rock, and this is really huge. And I think we shouldn't keep them the floor to do this. There are also left music bands and so on, and perhaps sometimes we should try to cooperate also with those kind of musicians who are interested in those topics. As for example, I was working with a musician which is very deep into the topic of climate crisis, and he has many songs about that, really cool, and it's a kind of rap hip hop, and doing in French, in English, and in German. So it's multicultural, it's left wing, it's anti-fascism, and those kinds of musicians we also need to they need to come to our movement. I think we have to work on this as well. Just my 2 cents.
Thanks, Claudia. And we're already getting calls in the chat for people asking for the DiEM for the DiEM Voice website. We will put it in the chat. We're just resolving some technical issues. But for now, the website can be found at voice.diem25.org. Danai. You're muted, Danai. Sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. Just to take it from Patrizia and Claudia, I just wanted to say that we have started already in Mera, which is in the Greek Parliament, has a small part of the money that we take from the Greek state has to go to cultural and research projects, and it can only be given to that. So we have created an institute called Center for Post-Capitalist Civilization, which has been running for a few months now. We launched it in May, and we had the chance through that exactly to experiment live and to see what can really the impact be, and does it actually draw more people in if you speak through the artistic language and through the artistic perspective. And what we have done is exactly mixing different forms of art, including music, of course, but also not just the high sort of arts, but also more popular kind of arts. So recently we have done an on-tour small with performance with 3 different groups of artists. So it's a shadow theater, which is a very old traditional Greek and Turkish and practice. But of course, bringing it to today and making political comments, because we had this in order to look at the future. We had 2 stand-up comedians, 2 young women, amazing, which is a very different, much more Western kind of form. And then we had an amazing musician, a young person with a huge following. After us, today is the last day actually of our event. He's going on tour in the States. It was a group of musicians from northern Greece playing traditional Greek music, but they have reinvented it. And he has done an amazing new way of his own in order to be a one-man show, but so he plays his musical instruments, 6 or 7 different ones of them different, and then he sort of records himself and creates these loops, and it's an amazing. So we had more than 1,000 people coming in each of our events, and this is really, it does work. This was the proof that we had an audience that would never come to any political I mean, we struggle to have people come to the political event sometimes, unless of course there is an election or such things, but it actually worked, and mixing these art forms I think was the way to go, and looking to the future.
Thank you, Danai. Anyone else like to comment? Add your 2 cents.
Well, if I can add something after Danai, in the meantime, can I?
Go on, please, yeah.
Thank you. Exactly, Danai. Thanks for telling us that, because exactly what I'm trying to say. I mean, the only way we have to invert the paradigm, the today paradigm, that today the all important things is to appear in social, even if you don't do anything, you are not able to do anything but just an appearance, it to create it, to encourage curious people. And again, absolutely, art in all sense is the only one of the most potential arm we have, and I'm proud to be part of Diem and Diem Voice, because yes, we are the only movement in Europe working in this direction at the same time in a network and connecting exactly all these tools. That's important, basically.
Thank you, Patrizia. Simona. Simona? There you are.
As
Unmute.
soon as I managed to unmute myself. Hi, everyone. I thought a lot about the question of our meeting tonight. And fundamentally, I think that art is a revolution in itself. It's revolutionary in the very idea of putting all of one's energies and passion and time in doing something just for the sake of creation, just for free. And this idea of freedom and creation is revolutionary in as much it entails consequence concerning power, the power of creation and the alienation of this power, concerning freedom, the freedom not to sell one's time and to be free to use it for creation, for art. It entails a series of revolutionary meanings and consequences that are just framed into a capitalistic frame when we think on how to use art. We live in a capitalistic frame, so we can't help to play this game and to use art and creation for the spectacle and for getting more audience for our message, and so on and so forth and so forth. But let's not forget that by using art this way, we are playing into we are playing the game of spectacle, the game of capitalism. And when playing this game, we confirm it. It's like, you remember Bansky produced the tons of fake banknotes just for fun and for ridiculizing money. And these banknotes now have a huge value in real money. This is the capitalism and the spectacle frame absorbing his gesture. So let's not forget that the real revolutionary contribute of art is in pointing out the possibilities of man and the creation and the freedom that are inside these possibilities.
Thank you, Simona. Beryl.
Okay, thank you, Mera. I think it would be helpful to consult three people in this regard: Rancière, Badiou, and Nicolas Bourriaud, because they have already proven the intensity of the relationship between art and politics. Since many years, they are really reaching large publics with their writings and ideas. For example, in The Politics of Aesthetics, which is the most important book in this subject, he concludes himself that he considers his own work to be a poetic endeavor. And he also shows us that there is a critical dilemma. There is an antique idea that defines artwork as a common craft labor. This definition has also infiltrated into modernism, and through modernism into the cultural policies of conservative or rightist parties. I think we have still this problem in our party policies, political party policies. And Rancière's aesthetic regime of art, he mentions it in that way, breaks down the hierarchies of the regimes which are infiltrating into the art, and says that new kinds of artwork create new communities and ways for people to relate to one another. And this gives the artist a possible relation to politics. We all know today that art contributes to politics, such as critical thinking, gaining aesthetic perspective, guiding communities, and maintaining peace and wisdom. However, it was also generally determined that artists should be influential in politics, but under the so-called traditional conservative conditions, artists, upon entering politics, cannot always sustain their position in politics as artists. So there is a kind of restriction to their position in the political influence. We know that the populist political party policies, Patricia just mentioned the situation in Italy. These party policies argue that artists should remain detached from the society by staying isolated and in their eclectic positions, and otherwise they would jeopardize both art itself and target the audience behind them. So I think opposing views defend that artists should set light to the society without being isolated from the rest or restricting their art to a certain political view. And they should hold art and universality of art one step ahead, so that they can speak to every individual in the society. As Danae just mentioned, that art should reach to different profiles of the society. So if an artist is working on refugee crisis, on migration, on borders, what is his position? It's political, extremely political. And since 40 years, I'm making political exhibitions. So art is already a political issue in this world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Beral. Juliana.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I think that if you're living in the world and you're expressing yourself through art, you will express what you experience. And if you experience a certain kind of society, you will see that in your art as well, or in someone's art. What I wanted to add is that I think that art also has a very educational component to itself, because I remember when I was younger, I would go to a concert or to some, and listen to bands who are political, and they would bring a topic to me. Like I would, you consume art as a young person, and maybe you don't even realize in that moment what you're consuming, but it prepares you for what you will learn ahead in your life. And then you come back and you're like, now I understand what this artist was talking about back then. And I think that this is a very, very key component to bring young people together, especially young people, through art, through different forms of cultural events, because it's also easy for them to go into a topic through this playful setting, because art is a very playful setting. And if I go to an exhibition as a person who's maybe not so political in their life, I get to talk about politics without being an expert on it, without being too involved. It opens the door for people to express themselves, even if they are not so highly educated on certain matters. And so I'm really happy that we have this platform in Diem. I think it's something that is exceptional, that many other parties or organizations lack this perspective of including artists in their work and accelerating the art that in that way. And I'm looking forward to see how it develops. I'm really happy that we are rebooting Diem Voice, and we have rebooted Diem Voice.
Thank you for that, Juliana. Yanis.
Hi, everyone. We of the left have a long tradition of interaction with art, which is very fruitful and very problematic at the same time. It's very fruitful because the artistic perspective has always been part of our understanding of society. Mark said, and I'll put it in the chat when I find it, if I remember correctly, something like, that art is a secret confession of humanity about its inner conflicts, and at the same time, something like, it captures the immortal movement of time. So it's an existential thing. It captures your truth in a way that science, whether it's political science or natural science, cannot capture. So, we've always had this appreciation, but at the same time, we have the problematic relationship with art, which stems from socialist realism, the attempt to instrumentalize art and to make it something like a propaganda weapon. And that was always catastrophic, because the moment you instrumentalize art, you deface it. And that's something that Diem Voice, from its very outset, set out not to do. To respect art as a bellwether of the society we live in, as a means by which to summon knowledge about the world, finding ways of expressing, of creating links with other movements, with other people, even with the enemy, even with the bastards of the world, because we do not want to assume that anybody has been born a bastard, even a fascist. We're not surrendering any human being to fascism, to the establishment. That's what it means to be humanist. And art is very useful at connecting even with a fascist. You can connect with a fascist through a song that, you know, it's impossible to connect with them at a human level through discussion, right? And so Diem Voice for Diem has always been an essential part. You see, most other movements, including educational systems, especially in the West, treat art and culture as something nice to have on top of everything else. It's a bit like, you know, good manners in the military academy. So officers being trained in a military academy are taught good manners because they may have to be in the presidential palace or in, you know, with the king and the queen, and they may have to be nice and they have to use the right fork and knife, right? But it's not essential in what they do at the battlefield. At the big battlefield, they have to butcher people. So it's additional. That's how culture is being treated by governments, by parliaments, by the establishment we live in. We don't do that. For us, it's, you know, doing art is doing politics, doing humanism, understanding the world, acting upon the world. Let me finish off by saying that, especially today, when capitalism is transforming to something worse than itself, that's my view at least. In a way, yeah, Behan, you were going to say something.
No, sorry, I thought you finished. Go for it, Jens. Finish.
Just my final sentence. My punchline, which is that art is the opposite of Facebook, because when it comes to, you know, Ford Motor Company or Volkswagen, you have the manufacturing of an object on behalf of a subject. The subject is the driver, the consumer, and you have the, you know, Volkswagen or Ford producing an object for the subject. What is common between art and Facebook is that both in Facebook and in art, okay, not only are you producing an object for the subject, but you're also producing a subject for the object. Okay, so when you're creating art, immediately you create an audience for the art, for the art, even if one didn't exist before. Similarly, when you create Facebook, you are creating not just a service for people, but people for the service, because people become instruments for Facebook to work. So, in a sense, the worst in today's techno-feudalism, which is Facebook for me, and the best, which is art, have something very, very much in common. Remember, in the 1920s, the greatest problem with fascism is that it had a lot of common things with socialism. So a critique of the banking system, a critique of capitalism, a critique of finance, a critique of too much inequality. Yeah, that's what Mussolini was saying. And he meant it, right? So similarly, Facebook and art share this capacity to produce the subjects for the object and the objects for the but in the same way that socialism was the greatest enemy of fascism. And in the end, we lost. Art is the greatest enemy of Facebook. We must not lose this one. Thank you.
Thanks, Yanis. And someone on the chat is giving us some quotes, which might be quite interesting to add to this conversation. The first is, art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. And another, which I quite like, speak softly, but carry a big can of paint. Claudia.
Yeah, I want to add something on Yanis's sentence about what artists are also all about, and why we have seen in the past, in the last 1.5 years, where the COVID pandemic rised up, we have seen how less people care about art and artists itself. So cinemas were closed, concerts didn't take place, galleries were closed, everything was closed down, and the governments didn't care at all. You know, it was like, we helped Lufthansa in Germany, we helped the big companies with big subventions, and the artists couldn't work. And this is also what artists need to have, something to eat, right? So it's not just that we want, as I understand it, right, as we as DiEM, and not just the organization or party who are talking through arts, but also talking for arts and artists and all the industry, which is not big. It's solo self-employed people like me, for example, PR people, people on catering services and all that stuff. There are many, many people who are suffering about this pandemic because no one took care of them. And I think we can do also good things for those people to give them more a better place in the society as well. That's what I think we should do as well as DiEM25.
Thanks, Claudia. Rosemary.
Yes, I was terribly interested in Yanis saying how close aspects of fascism were to aspects of socialism in the 30s. And I do think it's right that today, again, part of the political battle is to take on the fascist forms of culture and ask ourselves what we need to do, in a sense, in reply. I do think that the arts do this already incredibly richly. I have to say that having taught literature for many years and having been entranced by theatre for many years and having been fascinated by film, which I think is the art form of our time, one of the things that becomes so clear if you love these things is that central to it is the encounter with the other and the empathetic encounter with the other, the way that you can become other people, other worlds, other positions, and you don't just find out what you have in common, you experience what it is to be different. You hang in the balance. Things can change for you as you read about and become intimate with these other worlds. So that reminded me of the marvelous night that we had at Central St. Martin's in 2018, which had as its title, Creativity Must Operate Across Borders. And we were doing it in the context of everyone's depression after Brexit. But actually, of course, there was a much larger context that we were also addressing, which is that fascism always has to create them and us. It has to create toxic polarizations. It has to create a monocultural us. We know who we are because we're all like each other. We stand together. We know what we want. We'll never change. And we're going to win that way. Win through force, win through violence. And then it creates the enemy, which is an existential threat to it. And then it plunges people into fear and division over these them and us toxic polarizations. But art, best art that I know, does the opposite. It happens in the space between characters on a stage. It happens in the interaction with the story of the progress of a young man or a young girl, like the 18th century novel, the rise into society and the move towards a happy ending, the quest, where everything shifts and you shift with it. And at the middle of the novel, you never know where you are or what you think, if it's a really good novel. And this in-betweenness, this willingness to be uncertain, but to go for something better and to share it with people who you wouldn't have thought you'd share it with. These are strengths that I think we can try and develop in our encouragement of artists and all the people around us. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rosemary. Yanis. Okay, no, not Yanis. Who's next? Anyone else want to speak? Danai.
it takes too long to find the electronical hand. So just some random thoughts, taking a little bit from all of you, and everyone has said really wonderful and inspiring and important things. So some thoughts that I wrote down coming from your input is that, of course, art goes hand in hand with the beginning of humanity. I mean, it's a very deep need. It's not a luxury, as Yanis said, that people are trying to present it as a luxury so that they can easily put it aside, the politicians, I mean, and forget about the artists during a time of pandemic like we have just gone through. But it's the artist won't wait for someone to tell him, yeah, okay, you can do that, or no, now is not the time. He has the deep need. It's a matter of life and death for him or her to create what needs to come out into the air, into society. So it's not, and of course, art and creation is deeply political, because all of our choices in all of our life, the way we live our life and the way what art we make, it doesn't have to do with the subject, if it's a political subject, but it has to do with every decision you make about how you go about creating an art form, your work, which is the political part about it. I mean, the subject may be a flower, or it may be an army, but it's still political. It can be deeply political. And I think that what is crucial, especially in times of crisis, in which we have been experiencing for the last decade and more, of how crucial art is in these times, is exactly because it unleashes the positive energy, the positive forces in society, as Rosemary and Yanis mentioned before. In a sense, for me, not only about the artwork itself or the artist himself, but the whole process, like people working in a film or in a theater play, or helping a sculptor create his sculpture, they feel happy doing that. Whereas if they were, by making them happy, working on an artwork, on something creative, the forces, the positive forces within our society come to the surface. So, and this is something that reaches out to many, many more people than the artists themselves, or, you know, a much smaller circle, but it expands, and it's like concentric ripples that go throughout, and they embrace the whole world. And this is why it's so crucial, in my view, at least. Yeah, for now this, and please someone else take the floor and we'll come back.
Thank you, Danae. A few comments from our viewers. Sorry, I'm just looking at them on my phone here. So, arts have become even more elite, and common people feel even more distanced from them, as with any product essential to live but made into a luxury. Another comment, where was it? Don't think of art as monolithic. It is as complex and varied as its source, the human psyche. Interesting comments. Who else would like to speak or feels motivated by something they've heard? Anyone else? No? Claudia, was that? Juliana. Juliana.
I think Claudia was faster than me, but it's okay. No, I want to say that I think that, I mean, we live in the capitalistic world, right? So the problem is, like in every other industry with art, you have also like this 1% of people who are famous and very rich. And then you have like lots small artists who are unknown, who will probably always be unknown. So I think that being an artist under these circumstances is kind of, well, a struggle in itself. This is also something to not forget, because besides those artists who are known and who are famous and who are invited often to come somewhere, there are many more artists whose art never see the day, the light of day, you know. And I think to encourage people to be artistic, to make music, or to try to live their life with art, can transform our society, because if working in culture and becoming an artist is something that is not depending on whether you survive or not, this can transform society, I think, much faster. But for now, people have to, pay their life. So many people do art maybe as a hobby. Maybe they never become what they want to become. So I think giving also people a platform who will never had a chance to speak through the art to an audience is something that I can imagine will be something good that DM Voice can help with. Also to find young, new, or not even young, but artists who were artists all their life, and their art was never seen by anyone. And really encouraging people to be themselves is what it is in the end.
Thanks, Juliana. Claudia.
Yeah, the relation between salary and artwork is always difficult. That's something also Simona raised up before, because it's like artists doing something, what Danae said, they enjoy their work, right? And what we all think is, oh, work, enjoy, that doesn't fit. If you do something which is enjoyable, it shouldn't be work. It's a hobby. It's entertainment, and this is something which always makes art kind of not being something you have to pay for. I mean, this is what I have seen in the past. It's very difficult to, and artists who died really poor, who got famous afterwards, and nowadays we have artists who are suffering, and probably they will have the same when they are dead. They will rise up really big, but they couldn't live a nice life, and this should be also something we have to think about. We should enjoy our work, and though artists have to be sold, should have money as well.
Thanks, Claudia. And there are people in the chat that agree very strongly with you. Artists are workers too, says Christiane. When was that issue forgotten? Next, it's Rosemary.
Yes, I just think that we may as well think about the aspects of that particular subject where we also have a strength, because what happens, of course, with the arts, with all the arts, is that profit is upped. If you commodify them, sell the artists, turn them into celebrities, make them remote stars, and after a while, that becomes self-defeating. So all these arts industries are looking around for the young, the new, the fresh, the authentic, and the people who still really care about making art. They all go looking for talent. And meanwhile, if we progressives have any sense at all, we should be making sure that we're also encouraging these young artists, who are the ones who really care about changing their societies and doing it with the people they know and making new communities, new lives for themselves. So if we can skip, thank God, the whole commodification process, we can go for something much more human. We just have to realize what it is that we're after.
Thank you, Rosemary. Simona.
Well, I disagree. Art shouldn't be work, or either we must be very clear on what do we mean by work. Art is hard work, and depending on if it produces a value in the sense of something that is commodifiable, that can be sold on the market, or just it produces something that nobody likes and nobody would buy. I remember watching a movie about Van Gogh, and what strikes me in that movie is that the spectator knows that what this crazy man is producing will be something very valuable on the market. And and we all feel that people in the movie are stupid because they don't understand how much what this guy is producing values. But this is not the point. Van Gogh's production was not for the market. The goal is not it can be sold. The goal is not to produce value in the sense of something that should be paid, that should be commodifiable. It's a value in itself. It's a human creativity. And it doesn't depend on the fact that you produce something that the others would buy. And you may even produce something that is very ugly and bad. It doesn't matter.
But why do you disagree? How do you disagree, Simona? I'm saying exactly the same thing.
No,
I'm saying.
I agree with what somebody wrote in the chat.
Oh, I see. Oh, you should question.
Yes,
I agree with you. They're against
but,
commodification.
Yeah.
You have a war on against commodification.
Yeah, that's it. I totally agree with you. My point is, let's be very careful on the idea that an artist should be paid for his work, and so his work should be valued for his ability to be commodifiable. There's no measure of the value of an artwork, even if it's very bad. This is not the point. The point is human creativity and the being that comes to light when humans communicate to each other.
And as Juliana says, people have to live.
Yeah,
people also have to live.
The point, the revolutionary value of art is exactly it's pointing to the fact that human value is not something that should be paid, and that human value is not in being able to be commodifiable.
Thank you, Rosemary and Simona. Claudia, no, sorry, Patrizia.
Thank you. Just keep following this very good debate. I would propose to have a new incoming one on this topic, maybe inviting also the artists we work with. I mean, I'm just thinking at, for example, Miltos Manetas with his incredible artistic commitment for our Julian Assange campaign, but I'm sure Danae and Nadia can add some other names for sure. Just to translate in practice, this could be a good point to translate in practice some steps we talked about before. That's it, just a quick proposal. Thank you for the attention.
Thanks, Patrizia. Danae.
Yeah, so I think that we should definitely have talks with artists and people from the art world, and that would be interesting. I'm not sure if this format is the best or if we can organize some discussions, but we can see about that. I just wanted a quick comment about, because I am an artist myself, and I think I may not have been very, very clear about what I said about enjoying what one does as an artist. Yes, maybe sometimes you enjoyed it, and maybe other times it's just extremely hard. And it's not a matter of enjoying what you do. It's more a matter, what I said is that it's a deep need. So it's something you cannot avoid. It will have to come out. So whether it comes out easy or like a birth, which is hard, but also it's extremely gratifying. It's this kind of feeling, I would say. It's something that it has to come into the world, so somehow it will find its way out. Sometimes this can be pleasant, others not. And this, of course, gives space for people saying that yes, artists don't need to be paid, or they do need to be paid. All this, of course, artists and the work artists need to eat, and they need to pay rent, and they need to breathe. So yes, of course, somehow they need to be compensated. But no artist that makes a work in order to sell it. I mean, many do, unfortunately, but this is not what we're discussing here, I believe. And just a quick point about, I think maybe Nadia can also say a last word about the future plans, but I'm thinking that all the things that were said here about reaching out, to giving the voice to as many people as possible to express themselves, but also others to be in touch with what the creation process is what DM Voice aims to do. I think in general, I think it's important to support artists themselves practically, and this is why I mentioned before what we have been doing with Meta, even practically with the launch and with the nomadic tour that we did. We commissioned artists of different forms and of different, as I said, from musicians to shadow theater players to circus artists. We mixed all the forms. We don't have high art and low art and popular art or more exclusive art. Art is for everyone. And we try to support it in every way we can. And it's not always about money. It's about giving the opportunity and the platform for people to be able to express themselves, to feel part of this community. And for the people who are not creative themselves to be able to enjoy this and to have food for thought.
Thanks, Danai. Beral?
Very quickly to Danai, I think we should, The Voice should show very emblematic political work throughout the years. For example, when did you do this border work, which was very important and very early approach to the problematic situation we are living now. And secondly, I think as DiEM25, we should approach art and politics also from the economic perspective, from the capitalist perspective, and maybe contact economists who really worked on the monopolies on artistic markets, because there are two monopolies, official and private monopolies, which really determine the market of art.
Thank you, Beral. Does anyone else have any other comments before we hand over to Nadia to wrap it up? No? I can't see if you're raising your hands, not doing it virtually. If you're physically raising your hands, I can't tell. Okay.
Mehran, let me just say very briefly that it's meetings like this that help DiEM25 stand out amongst movements. No more needs to be said.
I concur. It's been very, very insightful and fascinating. Thank you, all of you. Nadia, over to you to wrap up.
I want to thank you all for all this discussion. We're going to hear again and again this discussion for inspiration. But basically, I think we're all thinking on the same, looking at the same direction, as Saint-Exupéry said once. And the thing we want more is to have more and more artists involved in Voice, so we can build up together this project. Because it's not something that we want to build from the top to the bottom. It's members' ideas that will give us the ideas for projects and make them happen. So you can always write to us on our email, voice@diem25.org, and help us, please, build up this huge, great project.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you again to the panel, and thank you to all of you out there for watching. One last little reminder, which is something related but indirectly. If you would like to join us on a panel like this, if you would like to be a member of DM25's coordinating collective, now is the time to apply. The deadline is August the 4th. If you think you've got the time and the skill set, and you're the sort of person who wants to help coordinate a growing progressive movement with a very healthy interest in art that puts art first, then please do apply. There will be a link shortly in the YouTube chat, or just go to dm25.org to find the application form. That's it. Thank you again. Thank you to the panel, and